so it's Frequelize This, and today we're talking about Radiohead.
Yeah, and I'm Rich, and why don't you two introduce yourselves?
I'm John.
Okay, so Rich, you want to talk about and lead this off here, right?
Yeah, because we were talking about like the whole why is this album why is this band known for this particular album? And I want to talk about Radiohead because a little bit of background about the three of us. I'm probably the biggest Radiohead fan of all three of us, and I know Dave likes Radiohead, John not so much. But I think John really, it took you 25 years to actually give Radiohead a fair listen, I think. So, and I've known you, I mean, we've known each other since Radiohead made their debut back in 93.
Yeah.
And you never just gave him a chance, never really listened to him. And
Right.
you came up to a pretty interesting conclusion, I thought. And
you want me to go with that right now?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, because
it's going to be part of the stuff I'm going to talk about.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I dove into Kid A and OK Computer, right? Because those seem to be the ones that a lot of people are really talking about. And then I also checked out. I also wanted to see, okay, well, what's the newest one? Which, by the way, they haven't made an album in a long time, right? So I think it's a Moon-Shaped Pool.
Yep.
From 16?
15.
Yeah.
So I dug into that one, and then I went a little bit in between with Hail to the Thief. Check that out. So I kind of was like, this is kind of mood music. And Rich, you and I talked about it a little bit, that it's really good for having on in the background while you're working. And I have a computer nerd job, so for me to have that on in the background, while I'm doing stuff, that was pleasant. That was good. I wasn't skipping any songs, so I didn't not like anything. But I guess what it was I was doing a little too many albums. I was doing too many albums in a row, I think, because I kept waiting for them to tip over into the part where they rock out, like Porcupine Tree does. The first 2 minutes of Arriving Somewhere But Here, right? That's just slow and atmospheric.
Yeah, it's
and
like 4 or 5 minutes, and minute 5.5, it just kicks in.
It builds up in a drop of some kind, and
And Radiohead never did that. They never tipped over into.
Okay, so let me ask this: Did you listen to the Bends and Pablo Honey in this process?
No. That would be where I go next.
And Rich, let me test this theory with you. If you go back prior to OK Computer as opposed to going after, you're listening to a different band.
Yeah,
I would agree with that, and that's one of the points I was going to make. And it's interesting. I would even go further and say, if you separate between Pablo Honey and the Bends, you're listening to two separate bands. If you know anything about Radiohead's live shows, they rarely, if ever, play anything off of Pablo Honey. They've kind of like disowned that record. It's kind of like, how Genesis put out From Genesis to Revelation, and
then walked away.
Talks about that album. Pablo Honey is pretty much From Genesis to Revelation, except it has Creep on it. Getting back to OK Computer, so let's set this whole thing up. Because I said, why is this known? Well, the thing is, Radiohead, this is kind of a no-brainer why it's known. I mean, this was the album that put them on the map. I know a lot of contemporary people thought, oh, this is a great prog album. I think Entertainment Weekly, actually, I think back in like 1999 or something, or 2000, they were doing a list of like their 5 favorite prog albums of all time. And they had the usual suspects. They had like, I think, Dark Side of the Moon, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. But then they also threw on OK Computer. And I thought, that's a really interesting pick. But then I looked at that album, and it does have these elements on there I heard recently one DJ on a Sirius XM just say, yeah, by the end of the album, they just said, screw it, we're just going to be Pink Floyd. And it really kind of fit that genre, that mold. So, obviously, a little background. Radio OK Computer was their third album. Actually got nominated for Album of the Year.
What year did this come out?
97. And it won, and it lost out to Bob Dylan for his album, Sorry We Didn't Nominate You for Blonde on Blonde. Oh, wait, no, it was called Time Out of Mind. But really, let's be honest, that's why they nominated Dylan.
But Radiohead they never owned the prog thing.
Oh, they hated
tried
that
to
term.
dodge that majorly. And I think they're right. I think they're right.
Well, here's the thing, though. And I have a theory about why the band and York especially pushed back so hard against that prog label. Because this is 1997, and you've had Rolling Stone and all these other rock journalists just ripping prog to shreds anytime they got a chance to. So it was a vastly uncool genre. And the fact that, OK Computer comes along and say, oh, this is prog. Yeah, if I'm Radiohead, damn right I'm pushing it back against that label, because I don't want to be, that was dork music, and I don't want to be considered dork music.
There's almost an element, I want to test this one out with you, Rich, but there's almost an element, I think Radiohead was pulling more of what I've been toying with today, an idea like, you want to call it postmodern psychedelia. I'm just making up a term, but that's what was that was what was noodling in my head as I'm listening to some of it today. I feel like they're pulling more from kind of a space, almost a space rock psychedelic standpoint, but with a more of a modern to postmodern beat structure to it. So there's a different rhythmic structure to it, but kind of that spaced background, the ambiance that they create with it has more akin to it with early psychedelia, or kind of your late 60s, early 70s psychedelic music than it does prog. But there's intersections between psychedelic music of that time and prog, and kind of those two blend. So I kind of think that's where the confusion comes in potentially.
Well, actually, and forgive me, I was looking off camera because I was feverishly pulling up the Wikipedia page on this, because I saw something prior to our conversation that really pulled us off. And it's a quote from Tom York saying that the starting point for OK Computer was the, quote, incredibly dense and terrifying sound of Bitches Brew, which is Miles Davis avant-garde jazz fusion that they did with like John McLaughlin of the Mahavishnu Orchestra. And that album has cited by a lot of people as a prog influence. So I think that is there, because that really is kind of jazz psychedelia. And if you go in there thinking, oh yeah, we're going to listen to Kind of Blue or Love Supreme by John Coltrane or something, you're going to be disappointed, because it's not that. It is something weird and fantastic.
So it's important to go into Radiohead knowing this is not a prog rock band. Actually, they're talked about in prog circles. Right. They're talked about by prog people, but they're not. They're not a prog band. They're experimental. They're art, and in some cases even avant-garde a little bit, or definitely influenced in that way.
Yeah, but see, I would say that they're not the classic prog in the way that we think of prog normally, but they are prog in the progressive sense, that they're doing things on their records that are much more in that prog influence. There's this one weird, wild theory, and I'm not really played around with this, but they said that there's a theory that OK Computer and In Rainbows are supposed to be played together. Like one track goes into the other, like the first track off of OK Computer gets followed by In Rainbows, back to OK Computer, stuff like that. The theory is that you can that they banged out In Rainbows in like 3 weeks. And so the theory is, you guys were sitting around for this for a while, and you just were waiting for this to drop. And yeah, and that's really kind of, I mean, the only other band that I can think of that would do that would be Tool, and Tool did something similar to that, and I can't remember what the specifics on that is. I'd have to look at that, but it's one of those things like, yeah, that's really kind of weird, really funky, and yeah, progressive. Maybe not prog, but progressive, definitely.
Let
And
me
I
ask you
really think,
something.
yeah,
So, some bands have the distinct periods,
yeah,
where phases of the career, So,
mhm,
Rush, it's easy to slice Rush into different phases, right? Genesis,
right,
you can do that with them too. So, can you do that with Radiohead? You already said the first album is a little bit of that one-off debut.
yeah.
Uh, how does that work with Radiohead, or does it work?
I think with Radiohead, I think you have those errors, those slices in very bite-sized portions, because Pablo Honey is an album unto itself, and then the Bends and OK Computer kind of go back to back in that whole thing, and they're kind of complementary albums. But then Kid A kicks off a whole different phase, and that's another point I wanted to make about Radiohead is that I remember when Kid A dropped, and in 1999, and a lot of Radiohead fans were pissed because they wanted OK Computer the next day, or OK Computer still okay, or whatever. It wasn't that, and it was a radical departure because it was much more electronica based. I mean, uh, the second song on that album. I mean, Kid A. I mean, York uses a vocoder in there, and he has this like weird, creepy, robotic voice as he sings, and that song like not tick people up, but it's like a lot of people are like, what the heck is this? Where are the guitars? Why does Idiotech sound like a a protege of EDM? What's going on here? But I think again, that's them trying to create different sounds, take their sound to a different genre, not wanting to repeat themselves. And B, that really gets back to that progressive label of progressive, not prog, just because it's like these guys are stretching the boundaries of what their sonic capabilities are. And they're doing it just to see what they can do, not what the audience expects. And you also
And
got
I
to
think,
remember, what's that, Dave?
well, I think also, like, let's move from Kid A, the song, not the album, but go to the third track, the national
Oh, that's right.
anthem.
Yeah.
Okay, so the national anthem gives me King Crimson flashbacks. It feels like a King Crimson style horn section gets used in there, which to me draws in kind of like, if you're going to experiment and if you're going to draw on but possibly what would be considered a prog band. But King Crimson was also I don't want to sit in a particular genre type band and pushing. So if they're drawing on something like that, and I don't know if you got that feel from that particular track, but that one to me feels like they're pulling some King Crimson.
I've actually never thought of that way. And now that you say that, I kind of want to go and compare some of this Radiohead period, specifically Kid A and Amnesiac, with some of the stuff that Crimson was doing in the 80s
Yeah,
with
sure.
Discipline and Three, a Perfect Pair and Beat.
Right.
Because that was a deliberate departure of, we aren't going to be doing Red and Charlotte and Bible Black anymore. And this is
Right.
after Fripp went did the spiritual journey thing, and then wound up hanging out in the Lower East Side with all these other new wave bands in the late '70s in New York, and that really influenced that sound. And I now want to do that. I think you might be on something here, Dave, just because.
The
So,
other the other fun one, I'll throw this in and then John jump in there. But since you brought up Amnesiac, so the first song on Amnesiac, try tapping the beat to it. It'll
Yeah.
throw you off. I was doing that this afternoon. It's packed like sardines in a crushed tin can. And that's the welcome to a fun little title. I'm like tapping the beat to this thing and I'm going, okay, they're messing with time signatures. They're doing something that's off
Yeah.
really intentionally, where you just kind of you get going and you're driving in the car and but you got like, and then it hits and then it doesn't, and then you think it's going to hit again and then it doesn't, and then it pauses and then it's there and you're like, okay, that was interesting. You're messing with me again. But I feel that that's another kind of fun prog-ish type
Yeah.
influence there,
And
or at
that,
least they're toying with those things. But again, the tones had more of an electronic feel to it.
yeah. But no, that trick on there actually is the forerunner of what they do on videotape, where they're actually starting the piano chords just slightly ahead of the drum beat. And that's how like Pack Like Sardines in a Crushed in Box is,
Yeah.
which is really cool.
So Kid A and Amnesiac were actually recorded like at the same time, and I think were
Yes.
considered to release as a double album. So getting back to my question, right? If that's a phase, uh, does Hail to the Thief continue that phase, or does that start yet a new phase? Is that different enough?
I think it's different enough. No, it's nothing about it. It is different enough because I think it actually adds some of those elements of Kid A and Amnesiac, but then folds a little bit of the Benz and OK Computer in there. So it's kind of like bringing the second phase albums and the third phase albums together and creating a whole fourth phase.
Cool. That's cool.
And it's really cool because I mean, and I will say, I like OK Computer, I like the Benz, but I kind of think that Hail to the Thief is my favorite album by them. And I think it's because they have these great elements from these four albums, and they're all put together, and they all are referencing, while at the same time being their own beast completely.
Okay, yeah, I Hail to the Thief is one of the ones I took some time to listen to, and I did enjoy that. It's pretty solid. Then where do
I
we go
will
from there? Is it in Rainbows?
in Rainbows, yeah, and in Rainbows, um, again, it's kind of hard. Radiohead is kind of hard to break into these genres because I think, and again, that's what makes them progressive, not prog, because they don't want to stick in their genre. They don't want to stick in their, in this labeled phase of, well, we're expected to have this sound, so we're going to do this and we're going to stand in this pocket for a while. And it's very rare to see bands do this. It's much more common to see artists that have built up enough goodwill to go ahead and bounce back and forth into different genres and do stuff. And I'll be talking about this guy in a few weeks, I think. Beck.
Mhm.
Beck is very much like that, where you have no idea what his next album is going to sound like because it could be anything. And Rainbows, so I guess Hail to the Thief is kind of its own animal because it's kind of set up like almost a, here's where we're at in the Radiohead discography so far. And then you have In Rainbows and King of Limbs, and they're much slower. They're more, even more melancholy. You have some of the experimentation, some of the electronic stuff going on there,
It's very much
but
about the atmosphere.
it's very atmospheric, absolutely. And um, In Rainbows, I think, has some really great lyrics on there too. I mean, that's the one album I think that York, and I know John, you're not a big fan of York's voice. Uh, I've never thought anything bad of it. I think because he sings in such a falsetto a lot of the time, that's fine with me. But I think in Rainbows, York uses his voice to almost create another atmospheric layer.
Yeah, he uses it as an
Yeah.
instrument for
Yeah, he
sure.
does.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he's always done that. And it's one of the things that after I talked to you about his not liking his voice, I didn't realize it when I said that what he's doing is using his voice as another instrument in the layer of the soundscape that they're trying to create. I want to talk though about Moonshaped Pool for a second, because so I did listen to Moonshaped Pool, quite enjoyed it. It's got my favorite Radiohead song on there by far that I've heard so far in Burn the Witch. Yeah,
Burn the Witch is a great song.
And then I heard Hail to the Thief. So what you were just talking about with In Rainbows and the King of Limbs, and I think you guys were saying that those were much more atmospheric, which sounds like I may enjoy going back to them. One of the things that stood out to me that I enjoyed about Moonshaped Pool that wasn't on earlier albums as much was the use of the string section.
Yeah.
Where does that come in and kind of become prominent like it does on Moonshaped Pool? Is it yet Moonshaped Pool, or does it come before?
It's a Moonshaped Pool, and again, I think this is an example of Radiohead trying to do another play around and be a little more progressive in their sound, and just adding those instrumentations. And you mentioned that that's their last album they put out, and I mean they're doing a lot of like different reissues or remixes of some of their older albums. I mean they did a pretty big one in 2017 for the 20th anniversary of OK Computer.
Yeah.
And now, Lord only knows when they're going to record a new album. I mean, Johnny Greenwood has made himself quite the reputation as a composer. He's gotten like some Oscar nominations for his work, like There Will Be Blood, I think. And then Tom York is doing a side project right now called The Smile. And that sound is nothing like Radiohead. That's more straight ahead rock, which is really kind of interesting, because the first time I heard it, I'm like, okay, this is York's voice. This doesn't sound like something York would do. But again, that's York being progressive, just taking his own career and doing something that is not expected, something that you would not think that he would do, which makes him a pretty fascinating cat, and Radiohead, for me anyway, a fascinating band.
Well, and that was a fascinating tour of Radiohead, and hey, this has been fun.
Yeah,
this
was cool. I loved this conversation because, like I said, I was it was a little bit of a chore after doing 3 albums back to back in a row in the same day. So I love when I can talk to someone though that's passionate about an artist. Rich, and Dave too, your comments too, really make me want to go back and check out more and not give up on them. So and I hope that does that for some of the viewers too.
Yeah, my advice is you have to be in a certain headspace to listen to Radiohead, just because it is an atmosphere. It creates a soundscape. It creates a mood. And if you're wanting to listen to like something high energy and get you pumped and listen to something by Anthrax or something. Don't listen to Radiohead.
Right. So, don't do this as a road trip.
Yeah.
No. Although if you're driving,
depends on where you're driving.
If you're driving through like Arizona at 10 p.m., oh yeah, you want to listen to the Bends, or heck, Amnesiac, or there's when you listen to it.
But I wanted to do a lightning round, rapid fire, and ask you, what is the radio album you recommend to certain type of people? So,
all right, go for it.
All right, so never heard Radiohead. I've heard the name. I feel like I need to check them out. So, what's the Radiohead album that you would recommend someone start with if they were someone our age that's an old classic rocker?
The Bends.
The Bends, okay. What's the Radiohead album you're going to recommend to the 20-year-old kid who is totally into these umpteen dime a dozen indie folk artists?
In Rainbows.
Cool. What's the
Because
Radiohead
those kids are
album?
going to be probably going to be paying attention to the lyrics.
Oh, nice. Okay, that's cool. What's the Radiohead album for a jazz person?
Kid A, actually, because
Oh,
there's a lot of, like, the national anthem, like Dave mentioned, that has some jazzy stuff in there, and either that or then the other one will be the sister album Amnesiac, because there's some really funky polyrhythms on there. Although, are we talking like, what was the question again?
jazz, a jazz guy.
Jazz. Okay. Duh. If you're talking about like classic 50s cool jazz, those two albums, if you're talking about acid jazz and like jazz fusion and stuff like that, okay, computer.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Uh, what's the Radiohead album to go to first for the metalhead?
Okay, computer, actually, which is
Yeah.
kind of weird, but that has some of their hardest rocking moments.
Okay. Cool. Um, just in my limited experience, I would almost say a moon-shaped pool.
Yeah.
Just be, yeah. I mean, maybe it's just this metalhead, but I find that there's a real connection between metal and orchestration, I guess. So
Yeah, I can
metal
see that.
and classical music, right? Or strings, the use of strings. I don't know, because you can get strings to chug, like metal, and that's almost what Burn the Witch is doing. But Burn the Witch could be a metal song.
Yeah,
Could it and
I can
I'd be
see
fun.
that.
I'll have to look and see if there's a cover out there, right? Like a heavy metal cover of that.
Right?
That'd be fun.
Ah, okay.
What's
You convinced me. I think Moonshade Pool is a better answer, actually.
oh cool.
Yeah.
Hey, I know a little something about Radiohead. All right. What's the Radiohead album for your mom?
Um, Pablo Honey.
Okay, why is that?
She's country and she would hate Radiohead anyway, so I might as well give her the first album. She's like, "This ain't Charlie Pride. Get it out of here."
Oh, that's cool. Thanks for playing along on that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I
Although I
knew
will
you'd be
say,
able to.
yeah. Although I will say, just for somebody who just wants to listen to dig into something good that doesn't have those kind of like fit into those archetypes, Hail to the Thief, because Hail to the Thief has everything. I don't want to be Stefan from SNL. It has everything, but um, I mean, it just has some great stuff. It has the loud, quiet stuff in the first. It has some experimentation. It has some great, like, funky synth stuff going on there. There's quiet, gentle moments on there. It has what is my second favorite Radiohead song. Uh, Second to only to Paranoid Android is They're There. They're There
Yeah,
builds. It is just such a simple, like, quiet, and then by the end, it's just going off, and it's
yeah,
just so great.
that's my favorite from that album. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it sounds like you're saying that's a pretty well-rounded album for them.
yeah. It's the one where when I'm on my computer and I'm needing to feeling like I want to listen to Radiohead. That's the one that I'm gravitating toward.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Dave, do you have a favorite Radiohead album?
Oh, interestingly, I think I haven't gone back to Radiohead other than for this, but I probably back in the day when I was listening to him, Kid A was probably the one that I enjoyed the most, which I find hilarious considering Rich's comment about all the Radiohead fans. "Well, it's not another OK Computer." Apparently, I've been the contrarian like for decades, where that's just been what it is. So
Yeah.
sure,
No. In this case, Dave, you're right though, because Kid A is a fantastic album. I dug it right away. I mean, How to Disappear Completely. I mean, that is a Lost Floyd song, 1000%, and that
Mhm.
just creates such a. There's your, there's that song. Okay, I'm gonna say this is your homework when we're done with this podcast. Go ahead and listen to "How to Disappear Completely," and then listen to "A Smart Kid" off of a Porcupine Tree's "Stupid Dream" album,
Oh, okay.
because I think they're very similar in soundscape, and I do believe that was the album. Was it that out? Was it "Stupid Dream"? Yeah, "Stupid Dream" was the one where Wilson kind of like takes a subtle jab at Radiohead, actually.
No,
Where it's
really.
like, you keep me listening to the bends.
Mm.
Yeah.
But then again, if you want to like sandwich that in between, you can go ahead and listen to a Subterranean Homesick Alien off of OK Computer, which came out in '97. There's
That's
a
my
great trio right there.
that's my favorite song from OK Computer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Kid A. So listening to them back to back, I think I am more immediately gravitated towards what was going on Kid A than OK Computer.
All right.
Yeah.
And I mean, with that, I mean, there's really no wrong answers when it comes to uh, Radiohead, just because their albums change so rapidly, and what they're doing on from record to record are so different. You can plug into any album and you be right, because that fits who you are and what you are. And
Mm,
I think that's a rarity that Radiohead has that other bands don't.
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
Uh,
there we go.
there we go.
That
All
was
right.
that was
Yeah.
Radiohead.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.